All right, everybody, get your engines fired up. It's time for lights out. Let's chat.
Hey everyone, welcome back to Lights Out, Let's Chat. Today we are talking about the thing that controls my blood pressure every single race weekend. That's right, we're talking strategy. Because Formula One is not just speed, it's controlled chaos, it's probability, it's risk management at 200 miles per hour. And sometimes it's a spreadsheet deciding your emotional stability. And I want to say something before we get into it. You might have noticed we don't have a race recap this week because, as you probably know by now, the Bahrain and Saudi Arabia Grand Prix were cancelled. Back to back, gone. And honestly, that's part of why I chose this topic. Because while the calendar sits empty and the paddock catches its breath, strategy is still happening. That's right, teams are still running simulations, still modeling tire data, still wargaming Miami. The race within the race never actually stops. And with these new regulations, in 2026 specifically, with the biggest regulation change in Formula One, strategy has never been more complicated, more controversial, or more important to understand. So, new recap today, just the deep dive you didn't know you needed. When we say strategy in Formula One, we're not just talking about pit stops, we're talking about race modeling, the process of creating highly detailed virtual images of the car, track, and external conditions to predict performance and optimize strategy. Every team has a strategist on the pit wall and at the factory running live simulations during the race. These models update every single lap based on tire wear data, lap time, gaps to other cars, traffic, weather forecast, and safety car probability. Yes, they literally simulate what if there's a crash on lap 28. Strategy is about constantly asking, if we pit now, where do we come out? If our rivals pit first, what's our counter move? If there's a safety car, do we gain or do we lose? And here's the wild part, most races are decided before the green flag even drops. Teams go into Sunday with multiple strategy plans. Plan A, ideal race. Plan B, early safety car. Plan C, tire degeneration, worse than expected. Plan chaos. Everything is on fire. And they switch between them in seconds. Now, in 2026, the complexity just got turned up to 11. Because this season, teams don't just have to model tires and traffic, they have to model energy. The 2026 cars run on a near 50-50 split between a combustion engine and an electric motor, which sounds cool in theory, but what it means in practice is that every single lap, drivers are making decisions about how to harvest, store, and deploy electrical power, when to use boost mode, when to activate overtake mode, when to lift and coast to recharge the battery. Now, Lewis Hamilton described the new regulations as ridiculously complex during pre season testing, and he's driven through 7 different regulation eras. So when he says ridiculously complex, we listen. What this means for strategy is that the pit wall now has to model two things simultaneously, the physical tire and the energy state of the car on every lap, every straight, every corner exit. Two cars, two drivers, two energy profiles. And a race that can swing on who manages their battery better in the last 10 laps, it's a lot. But it's also super fascinating. Let's go deeper into tires. Tire degradation isn't just they get slower. There are actually two types. We have thermal degradation, when the tire overheats and loses grip quickly, and surface wear, when the rubber physically wears down over laps. So, tracks destroy tires. Some cars are naturally harder on rubber. Some drivers are smoother and can extend a stint 3 to 5 laps longer, which is huge. And here's why that matters. Every extra lap you can stay out on decent tires give you more flexibility. Flexibility equals options. Options equal power. When you hear engineers say, we're extending, that usually means they believe their tire degradation is better than their competitors. Now that's strategy confidence. And in 2026, tires got even more interesting because they changed. Pirelli redesigned the compounds for this season. The tires are narrower, which means less grip, but also less drag and less weight. And here's where it gets really interesting for strategy. The performance gap between Pirelli compounds has been increased this year. Soft, medium, hard. The difference in lap time between them is bigger than it was in 2025, which means tire choice matters more, and getting it wrong costs more. But now layering energy management on top of that, a driver who is managing their battery on a long straight is also stressing their tires differently than a driver pushing flat out. One car is coasting gently into a corner, another is braking hard and late. Those two things affect tire temperature very differently. So in 2026, tire strategy and energy strategy are no longer separate. They're the same. And teams are still figuring out how to model that in real time. This is one of the biggest strategic trade-offs in Formula One. Overtaking is hard at many circuits, so sometimes track position is more valuable than fresh tires. So teams ask, is it better to stay out and defend, or pit, get fresh tires, and try to pass? If you pit and rejoin behind slower cars, you lose the advantage of new tires sitting in dirty air. Now, dirty air reduces downforce. Less downforce equals less grip equals slower lap times. So sometimes a faster strategy loses simply because of traffic. This is why qualifying matters so much. Starting position shapes your entire strategic world. And here's something really important about 2026 that changes this conversation. Dirty air is less dirty. One of the main goals of 2026 aerodynamic regulations was to reduce the turbulent wake that cars leave behind them. The washout, where turbulent air gets pushed outward and disrupts the car following behind. This has been significantly reduced. Similar front wings, a flatter floor replacing the ground effect tunnels. What that means in practice is that following another car is less punishing than it used to be. Cars can get closer, stay closer, which changes the track position calculation. Because if you can follow closely without losing as much lap time, maybe you don't need to pit as early, and maybe you can stay out, trust your tires, and wait for the right moment. And then there's overtake mode. This is brand new for 2026, replacing DRS. If a driver gets within 1 second of the car ahead at a certain point, they get access to an extra electrical power for the following lap. More harvest, more deployment, a genuine speed advantage to attack with. So, the track position equation 2026 looks like this. Is my track position worth defending? Can I stay within a second to activate overtake mode? Or is it better to pit, get fresh tires, and come back with a speed advantage and overtake mode available? Strategists are running those numbers in real time every single lap. They're still figuring out what the right answers are. Let's break down why the undercut is so powerful. When you pit for fresh tires, your car is lighter, less fuel burnt. Your tires are at peak grip. The driver ahead is struggling on worn rubber. If you can gain 1 to 2 seconds over a couple laps while they stay out, you leapfrog them when they pit. But here's the catch. If the new tires take time to warm up, the undercut fails. So, teams have to predict tire warm up time, pit lane traffic, competitor reaction, It's a timing puzzle. In 2026, the undercut has a new variable nobody has fully solved yet: energy state. When you pit, you obviously get fresh tires, but you also reset your energy cycle. Where are you in your battery charge when you exit the pit lane? Is the car ahead of you in a high energy phase or a low energy phase? Because a car on fresh tires but low battery can be caught by a car on older tires but a full power. And there's a flip side too. The overcut, staying out longer than your rival, can now be more powerful than before if the driver staying out can manage their energy well enough to maintain pace while their competitor is stuck behind traffic on cold tires after a pit stop. Basically, the undercut and overcut still exist. They still work, but the calculation now has a third dimension, and teams that model energy management better than their rivals are going to find strategy windows that no one else sees. When a safety car comes out, the field slows down dramatically. Because everyone is moving slower, the time lost in the pit lane shrinks. That's why you'll hear, "This is a cheap stop." But here's the dilemma. If you pit, you might lose track position on the restart. If you don't pit, everyone behind you on fresh tires becomes a threat. Sometimes the right call only becomes obvious 20 laps later, and that's what makes it brutal. There's a version of the safety car that sometimes gets overlooked: the virtual safety car, or VSC. The VSC was introduced in 2015. Instead of a physical safety car coming out, drivers are required to slow down to a minimum lap time delta, a percentage above their fastest race lap. No overtaking, no pushing, just controlled pace. And the strategy math is completely different. Under a full safety car, the pit lane time loss shrinks dramatically because the whole field is bunched up and moving slowly. Under a VSC, cars are still spread out, still maintaining gaps, still moving at pace. The pit stop cost doesn't shrink as much, so teams have to calculate in seconds: is the VSC long enough and slow enough to make a stop worthwhile? Get it wrong and you come out in traffic. Get it right and you just pulled off one of the most satisfying strategic moves in the sport. And in 2026, the restart after a safety car is a whole new calculation. Because when the field goes back to green, who has energy? Who was able to harvest during the slow laps, and who wasn't? The driver who exits the safety car period with a full battery has a massive advantage in those first few laps. Strategists are literally modeling battery state heading into the restart. It is a lot to think about, and honestly, it's kind of incredible that humans do this at race pace. Drivers operate on feel. They can sense rear instability, front locking, tire grip fading, but strategists operate on numbers. Sometimes the data says, "You're fine," but the driver says, "I'm absolutely not fine." That tension is real. And sometimes the race is decided by who wins that argument. And in 2026, that tension between driver feel, and engineered data has never been more raw. Because in this new regulation era, drivers are being asked to do something that goes against every instinct they've spent their careers building: lift off the throttle on purpose, mid straight, at full speed. It's called lift and coast. And it's how cars harvest energy and recharge the battery when they're not under braking. The driver lifts the throttle early, before the braking point, to let the car recover energy. Oliver Behrman called it annoying and sad. Fernando Alonso says drivers can no longer win a tenth with courage in qualifying. Lando Norris described watching his speed drop 56 kilometers per hour on a straight as something that hurts your soul. The engineers say the data shows this is the fastest way around the lap. The drivers say it doesn't feel like racing. And here's the thing: both of them are right. The data is correct. Lift and coast, done right, produces a faster lap time than staying flat and running out of battery. But what it produces on screen, what it looks like to a fan watching onboard footage, what it feels like to a driver who has trained their whole life to go flat out, it's deeply uncomfortable. Lewis Hamilton went public with it after Japan, saying drivers have been completely sidelined from the conversations about these regulations. That's a serious statement, and it tells you how deep this tension runs right now. The FIA is meeting with teams and power unit manufacturers in early April to try to address it. Changes are expected before Miami, but this argument between driver feel and engineered data, it's the defying story of the 2026 season so far. Here's something people don't always think about. Strategy isn't just about this race. It's about the championship. If you're fighting for a title, you might take fewer risks. If you're a midfield team, you gamble. A P2 might be more valuable than risking a DNF chasing P1. So strategy also reflects team goals, points situation, long-term development, it's layered decision making. And in 2026, championship strategy is uniquely complicated because this season nobody really knows where they stand yet. 3 races in, 2 of them canceled, so the teams with the most resource, like McLaren, Ferrari, Mercedes, Red Bull, have had almost no real world data to validate their development direction. And the smaller teams who rely even more on race data are flying even more blind. Lando Norris is the defending champion. McLaren are the defending constructors champion. But defending a title in a brand new regulation era is completely different challenge than defending one in a stable rules environment. Your championship strategy from last year is basically useless. And then there's the new teams. Cadillac is on the grid for the first time as an 11th team running Ferrari power. Audi has taken over for Sauber and is running their own engine for the first time. These teams aren't championship fighting. Their championship strategy is survival, learning, and banking data. And Honda is now powering Aston Martin exclusively, having left Red Bull. Red Bull is now running their own Red Bull Ford powertrains engine for the first time. So, championship strategy for those two teams is partly about whether their power unit is good enough to fight, and they genuinely don't know yet. That uncertainty makes every single strategy call this season carry extra weight because you're not just managing a race, you're managing a season where the competitive order hasn't been established yet. Strategy makes Formula One emotional because you can do everything right and still lose. You can get lucky and win, you can gamble and become a hero, or gamble and become a meme. It's unpredictable, it's tense, it's human. And once you understand strategy, you stop just watching racing. You start predicting moves. And that's when F1 becomes addictive. And right now in 2026, it's especially addictive because the strategy is broken in ways that nobody fully predict. The FIA designed these regulations to create more overtaking, closer racing, and a more level playing field, and some of that is working. Cars can follow each other more closely. Overtake mode creates genuine attacking opportunities. Of course, there's a major stakeholder meeting happening in early April right now. As you're listening to this, between the FIA, Liberty Media, all 10 team technical chiefs, and the power unit manufacturers, 6 potential rule fixes are on the table. Changes before Miami are expected. So, the strategy episode you just listened to, it's about to get an update because the rules of the game are still being written. Okay, let's dive into question of the week because this one is a good one. If you have ever watched Formula One, you've definitely thought this. When a driver says the tires are gone, why don't teams just pit them immediately? And honestly, when I first started watching, this broke my brain a little too. Because your instinct is completely logical, right? Driver says, tires are gone. So you think, okay, pit the car, get new tires, problem solved. Simple. Except it's not how Formula One works at all. First, the tires are gone doesn't mean what you think it means. It doesn't mean they're about to explode or fall off the car. It just means grip is dropping, performance is falling, and they're starting to lose lap time. But here's the key: losing time is irrelevant. If that driver is still faster than the cars behind them, they stay out. Because in Formula One, track position can be more valuable than fresh tires. Second, pitting costs time, a lot of it. We're talking 18 to 25 seconds total. And that's not just to stop itself. That's slowing down, pit lane speed limit, the stop, and accelerating back out. So the strategist is doing math immediately. How much time are we losing per lap? How many laps are left? If you're losing, say, half a second per lap over 15 laps, that's 7.5 seconds, which is still way less than the cost of a pit stop. So, in that situation, staying out is actually faster. Third, they're not just watching their driver, they're watching everyone. If your rival pits right after your driver complains, everything changes. Now, the question becomes, do we react or do we stay out and defend track position? And that decision is happening in seconds with live data, while 19, more like 21 other cars are doing their own strategies at the same time. That's why strategy feels chaotic, because it is. Now in 2026, there's another layer: energy. Now it's not just where do we come out, it's what's our battery level when we come out. Because a driver on fresh tires with low battery can get caught by someone on older tires who has full power in overtake mode. So even a perfect pit stop can backfire. So the next time you hear my tires are gone and the team says, copy, stay out, they're not ignoring the driver. They're running about 15 calculations in real time, with maybe 8 seconds to decide. That's not hesitation, that's strategy. Alright, let's dive into my favorite segment of the podcast: F1 News of the Week. This one's definitely going to be a little bit interesting because I have 3 different stories to share with you. We're going to start off strong with Alpine. This one kind of sounds like a conspiracy theory, but it kind of is. Except the thing that triggered it is very real. Here's what happened. At the Chinese Grand Prix, Franco Colapinto finished 10th, his only points finished of the season so far. His teammate, Pierre Gasly, finished 6th. The gap between them, 49 seconds. Fans noticed, and then they noticed something else. The 2 cars weren't running identical. Colapinto himself said on a camera that there were parts on Gasly's car that he didn't have, and that he would have really liked to have them soon. And the internet? Well, the internet did what it always does. They decided Alpine was sabotaging their own driver. Now, what actually happened is a lot less dramatic. It later came out that there was a gearbox issue just before the Shanghai weekend, which forced Colapinto back onto an older spec part from testing. A manufacturing problem, not a conspiracy. But the gap was real. The difference was visible, and Colapinto said it himself. So, the speculation exploded. And then Japan happened. At Suzuka, Oliver Behrman went into the grass and spun at over 190 miles per hour, trying to avoid Colapinto, who was slowing down on the flat out run toward Spoon Cove. Behrman hit the barriers at 50 Gs. And this is where everything connects back to what we've been talking about. Because the incident was triggered by a 45-kilometer speed difference. Colapinto was harvesting energy, slowing the car. Behrman was developing full boost, trying to overtake. Same straight, two completely different speeds, and neither driver fully knew. Behrman said it was a massive overspeed, about 50 kilometers per hour. We warned the FIA this could happen, and this is a really unfortunate result. And importantly, Haas made it clear Colapinto did nothing wrong. His speed on that lap, completely constant. The problem wasn't the driver, it was the closing speed. It was the new regulations. Behrman luckily walked away with a bruised knee, and honestly, the entire paddock exhaled because it could have been so much worse. Now, back to Alpine. After Japan, Colapinto finished 16th. Gasly finished 7th. The gap even bigger. And the sabotage theories came back louder, messier, more aggressive. Online abuse followed, even death threats. This got ugly. So Alpine did something you almost never see. They released a 1,200-word open letter addressing everything: the sabotage claims, the car differences, the online abuse. And they were very clear: there was no sabotage. Both cars are running the exact same equipment with one gearbox related issue in China. That's it. Here's the honest takeaway: the sabotage theory, almost certainly false. Teams do not throw away points on purpose. It makes zero sense, competitively or financially, but the frustration behind it, that's real. Because a 49-second gap is hard to ignore, and fans are asking a fair question: why is there such a difference? And Alpine is going to have to answer that on the track. And honestly, everything we just talked about, the strategy, the energy systems, the chaos, that's not just affecting racing, it's affecting the future of the sport. Because before we even get into the FIA meeting, there's another development happening behind the scenes that could be just as important long term. It's official: Max Verstappen's race engineer is heading to McLaren in 2028 as the chief racing officer. And this is a really big deal. Now, if you're newer to Formula One, that might not sound huge, but this isn't just an engineer moving teams. A race engineer is the voice in the driver's ear every single lap. They're calling strategy: when to push, when to save, when to pit, how to manage the race. They're the connection between the driver and the entire team. And in Verstappen's case, that relationship has been elite. Years of trust, years of communication, years of understanding exactly how he drives and how he reacts under pressure. You don't replace that. So, with McLaren bringing that in, they're not just hiring a person, they're gaining championship level decision making, elite race management, and insight into one of the most successful driver systems in modern Formula One. That's a competitive advantage. And timing matters, because in a season like this, where strategy is more complex than ever, where energy management is deciding races, the voice on the radio matters more than ever. Now, the real question everyone is asking is, will Max actually retire, or will he be following his race engineer to McLaren in 2028? Of course, Red Bull could lose a key piece of their dominance. McLaren already on the rise. It gains that experience. That's not just a staff change. That's potential shift in power. And all of this is happening at the exact same time as the FIA trying to fix the rules. And This is the story of the 2026 season because everything we've talked about today, strategy, energy management, lift and coast, overtake, is now being debated in one room. There's a rare agreement across the grid. Something isn't working. There's three major problems. Number one, safety. Behrman's crash made it real. Speed differences are dangerous, and teams had already warned this could happen. Two, qualifying. Drivers can't go flat out. They're running out of energy mid lap, which led to one of the strongest quotes of the season, calling qualifying a joke. Number three, straight line performance. Cars are slowing down mid straight, and visually, it just doesn't feel like Formula One. Fixes are being discussed, but none of them are simple. And here's the problem: some teams benefit from the certain rules, which means they have no insight to change them. So now you have teams pushing for change, teams resisting, drivers frustrated, and a season happening in real time. And that's where we are. The rules are changing, the racing is adapting, and Miami is either where Formula One stabilizes or where everything gets louder. That's everything on F1 News of the Week. So next time you're watching a race, don't just watch who's in first. Watch the gaps. Watch the tires. Watch the radio. Watch the safety car timing. That's where the real story is happening. And once you see it, you can't unsee it. So the next time someone pits at a weird time, remember, that wasn't random. That wasn't panic. That was 30 people running live simulations and making the best call they could in 8 seconds. And sometimes it still doesn't work. That's Formula One, and that's why we love it. Thank you everyone for listening. And if you're not subscribed to my YouTube channel, go ahead to Lights Out Let's Chat and subscribe to it. I also now have a Facebook page and a Instagram. Feel free to go check those out, and I'll see you next time.
From lights out to the checkered flag, this has been Lights Out Let's Chat podcast. We'll see you next time.